One, as concerned scholar. Second, as concerned community fellows. In fact, it is a historic that Rongmei Scholars Association, which was formed in 2018, has seen the light today. We take this opportunity to welcome each and every participant in this evening. Also, I take this opportunity to share few words about Rongmei Scholars Association. The aim of Rongmei Scholars Association is to provide academic platform, engage with issues pertaining to the welfare of the Rongmei people, and also collaborate with other institutions and organizations. Indeed, RSA is a big platform, not only for community, but also to intervene in many other policies and in any other academic endeavors that from time to time we organized. Let wisdom guide, as the motto of the Rongmei Scholars Association suggests. It will continue to excel and promote academic growth and discussion. Indeed, RSA is a political group, seeks to bring all the Rongmeis together to groom our younger scholars and at the same time to work together as one. I, as chairperson and also the president of the Rongmei Scholars Association, welcome to this inaugural talk. The topic for us today is titled Writing the Oral, Folklore and Print Culture of the Rongmeis. We have the first speaker with us, Dr. Senganlu Thaimei. He teaches English in Miranda House College, recently promoted to associate professor. Let me give a small introduction to the participants. Dr. Senganlu is involved in archiving projects in the University of Delhi. She has directed and scripted a documentary film called Gangai, the Festival of the Rongmei Nagas, in 2017. He has curated books in Rongmei language and presented papers in India as well as abroad. He is also a virtual artist and illustrator. He illustrated Estherine Kiri's story in 2020. I take this opportunity for inaugural talk, and as I have said, this is indeed a historic moment. Each member of the Rongmei Scholars Association teaches in many premier institutions. Many of the members of RSA are involved in active writing and publication, but yet as one community, yet as one association. This is the first initiative of RSA, and in that regard, I invite each and everyone from today onwards to travel together a long journey which will bring not only happiness, but also academic growth, and wishing each and everyone a good success to start this new journey. So without spending much time, I take this opportunity to invite the speaker for the inaugural talk, Dr. Senganlu. She will speak for about 30 to 35 minutes. And after that, I will open to the house for discussions. May I request each member to stay muted, and I take this time to the speaker for the inaugural talk, Dr. Senganlu. Please take your time.
Thank you so much for the introduction and also for briefly stating the purpose and plans of RSA. We started back in 2018, but we are having the first inaugural talk. And to start with, I wanted to share a little bit of what I've done and why this paper was particularly selected. I could have presented in other papers as well, but then this particular talk, I want to focus on the kind of treasure trove that we have among the Rongmei print culture, and I'm going to particularly look at the print folklore in print rather, but then I'll be looking at the history or literary history of the Rongmeis. So it's going to be, it's a work that I've done for over 10 years, and I'm going to cram it up in like 30 minutes. So I think I'll leave a lot of time for question and answer hour. It is almost like a teaser to what you could do with the kind of material that we have in our midst. You know, we have done some work, and a lot of people don't know that we have so many or so much resources in our midst. So my initial foray in this background my initial foray into researching on oral tradition focused on mainly three genres of folklore, that is proverbs, tales, and songs, based on oral collection. Prior to that, I worked for a project for Center for Academic Translation and Archiving in Delhi University. In the process of my fieldwork, I stumbled upon books in Rongmei language, initially just 80 of them, 80. And over time, I started finding books after books and books after books. I spoke to the author and they said, oh, there is a book that I wrote long ago, and here is the last one copy I have, you can have it, or something like that. So over the years, I have about 250 books, and quite a few in that sense by tribal community standards. And it has genres ranging from folklore, of course, and then novels, short stories, poems, plays, and of course, also the Christian literature in translation. So the question of print culture became vital to see the emergence of what would comprise as the literature or the history of literary production in the communities such as Rongmeis, that the literacy, a community whose history of literacy was as late as the third decade of the 20th century. And in these, it's not my theory, it's my finding that folklore has been the bedrock of this literary production. So I'll be dividing my talk into three parts just for the convenience of remembering. The first section, I will kind of trace the history of the emergence of Rongmei literature and explore the changing emphasis by identifying the dominant genre seen in broad phases in the decades following the first publication, which is, of course, I'll be talking about it, the Christian literature. And the second section, I will kind of look at folklore in print, how the oral tales and songs get written or rewritten over decades, and how they are soft, they are malleable, they're soft in the hands of the author, constantly evolving to serve specific purposes. So whether it's anthology and hands to preserve the fast disappearing cultural traditions, or to serve as a historical documentation to assert a distinctive ethnic identity within the larger socio-political grouping, particularly known as so the third section, I'm going to examine what we call the distant reading, the catalog that I have prepared of these 250 books, where I have that will give a clearer picture of the literary culture of the Rongmeis. So I'll begin quickly. I'll just dive right there and then start with the beginning. So where does it start? Where does all this print culture start amongst the Rongmei? The print culture began among the Rongmei with the coming of Christianity in the early decades of the 20th century. The first printed book in Rongmei language was a translation called Rongmei, and this was in 1937. And this is not by a native Rongmei writer, but rather it is by a Kuki, a Thadao speaking person called Pakos.
Progress.
A Kuki missionary who was trained in Pettigrew Mission School in northern district of Ukhrul in Manipur. Pakho Sitho was one of the 12 students of Pettigrew, no doubt, groomed to become native missionaries in the hill areas of Manipur. He later married a Rongmei girl from Sianpang village in Tamenglong and spoke Rongmei fluently. Now, after a gap of about 4 years, an American missionary, Julia A. Rose, a former worker of Baptist Mission who worked independently among Rongmei, published a translation of SGM, gospel tracts. SGM is a short form of script gift mission. This is a huge project during the World War where there are tracts sent out to the soldiers, but later on after the World War, the tracts carried on in different parts of Africa, in Asia, and in Europe as well. So now this SGM was translated into Rongmei by Julia A. Rose, and she also published, along with gospel tracts, she also published a primer titled Kabangbi in 1941, and later she published the Gospel of Luke in 1959 and Gospel of John in 1961. So the first Rongmei book written by a native speaker was in 1952. It was a book on rituals. Again, like I was saying, the native writer, when the missionary write, they write primers, and there is an education project that has in mind, and then tracts and translation in bits and pieces of the New Testament. But the first Rongmei, a native writer would be a writer called Chauba, and he has written a book in 1952 on the rituals of the chants of the rituals, and then after 3 years, 1952, then 1957. In 1957, a few years later, a native speaker came out with an arithmetic primer called Angko Bangbi. It's like 1957, and it's by Reverend Mengan Panmei. He was an illustrious, very young, but one of the most illustrious evangelists and pastor in the history of Rongmei people, who became, a prominent leader in Zelengrong Christian Association. But from the 1950s, there is this separation of the societies. The literature society began to grow out from this collective. I was muted, I don't know, somehow. Anyway, so I was saying that from the 1950s, this literature society that we see has grown out from the collective Zelengrong Christian Association, Liangmei Christian Literature Society in 1958, and Rongmei Christian Literature Society in 1961, and Thaimei Christian Literature Society in 1967. So these associations primarily devoted to translate the Bible and the hymns. And in 1961, in the case of the Rongmeis, in 1961, the Rongmei Christian literature entrusted again the Baptist Mid-Mission missionary Julia A. Rose, along with a Rongmei native writer Kaitonang, to translate the Holy Bible. So now, in 1965, the Bible Society of India, Pakistan, and Ceylon took up this project in collaboration with Julia Rose in Asapali in Qatar, and worked towards, and the project was completed for the first time in 1974. So the consumption of this Bible, the hymn, and other devotional songs, and published with the support of the missionaries, were mostly confined to Christian population in the hill districts in the present day Tamenglong and None district in the mid 20th century. century. So almost parallel, almost parallel to the production of Christian literature, the Rongmei population, mostly living in the Infal Valley area, with their easy accessibility to printing presses, had begun to publish booklets on rituals, folk songs, and other cultural forms. The first book, again, like I was saying, the first book on traditional ritual chant was called Kabuimei Kasapriyak Rasoy, a book on traditional ritual, 1952. And then by Ji Chawa, and a resident of Kaisamthong Rongmei village. And Kaisamthong was originally, there is an interesting fact about the village, the strategic location of Kaisamthong village. It is strategic because, first of all, it was a settlement given to palace guards. And they were band party musicians. So many of the forefathers of present-day Kaisamthong people, their forefathers were musicians in the palace of Kangla. And then and also the settlement, the present Kaisamthong, is a strategic location being next door to Yai School, where Meitei nobility resided. And given and this has given the villager a relatively early exposure to modernity. Earlier than printing presses, they were introduced to modern theater. And due to this close proximity to Manipur Dramatic Union, MDU, it's still present there near Yai School. And it's the state first proscenium art theater. It was located in the Yai School Police Lane. And this proscenium art theater in MDU, in Manipur Dramatic Union, is an imitation of the Calcutta proscenium art theater. And Calcutta proscenium art theater was an imitation of the Victorian Victorian proscenium art theater in London. So it trickles down to very close to our home. And here we have you see that there are stories even earlier than that. There are stories of Rongmei folk of Kaisamthong performing unscripted enactment of folk heroic tales. In the palace of Maharaja Churachand. Okay, but it was not until 1956 that the first ever properly scripted Rongmei play called Tingkao Sammai Roy Na Kai Datmai, okay, was staged in the theater. The play, interestingly, we encourage young writers. Was written by a 19-year-old Pouzailong Thaimei, who later on went on to become perhaps the most illustrious playwright in Rongmei language. He went on to writing 21 plays, and also he was awarded state as well as national playwright awards. And these plays were mostly performed in MDU theater, and among them this earlier, but interestingly, what you see is that these plays that I'm talking about, which were staged in MDU, were based on the folk heroic tales. Like the first one, let's say in 1960, the name of the play is called Lian Tuong, and the second play in 1962 was called Guilianai, and the third play in 1966 was called Jainu Duipang. The Jainu Duipang is a very interesting play where there is this conflict between two villagers, and because there was this hunting problem, intrusion, infringement of property, and property here is the wild animal that stray into the land of the neighboring village, and the whole bloody conflict started because of this hunting ground, turfs. And so it's still relevant to us, because when it comes to compensation, the railway came, and then there is this village says that it's mine, this village says that it's mine. So there is still going on, and this kind of conflict went back to our old traditional idea of this demarcation of land, land and our belonging, or turfs, whatever you call it. So the point that I'm trying to make is, even when they are experimenting a very modern format or modern experimentation of modern genre of writing, they were still going back to the storyline, the resources were folklore. Okay, I was saying the Len Tuong, Guilianai, Jainu Duipang, and then in 1968 he wrote a play called Leng Suanai. Okay, and these are all retelling of the popular stories. So apart from plays, he wrote several other short stories and in Meitei language as well, and also, but it was never printed. Out of the 21 plays that he has written, only two were only four rather, four were published, were printed. And also, but then the first ever, the first ever play that was printed was not by Pozailung Thaimei, but by somebody called P.K. Rongmei, and it is called Rongmei Puan. And of course it belongs to the writer belongs to the same village as Thaimei, and thematically of course they evolve from the retelling, the reenactment of the popular folklore to more obviously more popular romance, influences from both Hindi and Manipuri commercial cinema. So what is interesting is also that in 1972, during the fifth 5-year plans, fourth 5 years plan, Manipur became a state, and by the fifth 5-year plan, along with several other scholarships given to tribal students and tribal communities, there was some money sanctioned for publication of tribal dialects. So that is, and who were the beneficiaries of this funding? Mostly it's the people, because of the proximity to tribal development department and the accessibility to the printing press and things like that. A lot of Rongmei people residing in Phal were getting the benefit, and the first thing they did was collect, document, document what? Folklore, of course. So now you see that here, unlike you would see that during this time, there was the funding were very small, but that encouraged them to start publishing. And during the time when this funding started coming, the number of folk songs publication, there were about 20 of them, and not only 20, but they were self-publishing books also in folklore. Somebody like Pulau Gargongning and all, he had authored like 5 books on folk songs, and he has collected over 500 songs, and not only collected but also printed. So this was happening on the one hand, but on the other hand, there was also another sort of a movement, that was literary movement that was taking place in the 80s and then 70s and 80s. But what is most interesting is that the literary society, which was earlier, when we say literature society, it was Bible translation and translation of the hymns and blah 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 tracks and all of that. But then you would find that these literary societies that came out in the late 80s and early 90s were creative writers. And here we have this Kabui Literature Society, and also most importantly the Writers Forum. It is interesting because unlike other society, it doesn't have the name of the tribe. It just says Writers Forum. Of course, all of them are Rongmeis. All of them were writing in Rongmei, and they have this group that gathered at Ragailong English School, where there is still Ragailong English School there. That's my village. So in 1992, they gathered all these aspiring writers, people who were already writing, people who were already publishing the folklore collection, and all of them, they gathered and they formed this Writers Forum. And you would find it's almost like a renaissance of Rongmei literary moment. Here you see that this Writers Forum, if you look, I found a picture in Rongmei Encyclopedia where there is this picture of this Writers Forum members sitting there, and all of them, I have read their work, and I have collected their books, and it's really interesting because these people, this bunch of guys who were like teachers, who were government clerks, and they were not really high profile people, but they were writing. And what were they writing? They all came together and they started writing poems, novels. They experimented all these modern forms and modern literary forms. And after that, what is interesting is in the 2000s, they went, in the vocabulary of music industry, they went solo. Okay, from Writers Forum, they went into different area of expertises. I'll give you some example. Starting from Lanbuan Rongmai, and Star Kamai, they continued with their performative art. They acted in Manipuri cinema. Whenever there is a tribal character, they appear there. And you would see that not only that, but also they wrote patriotic songs and poems, and they wrote short stories, and they talk about how to modernize our people and things like that. And CP Lungkubuan and Pulau Rongmei, and they went to become the linguistic activists, and they led the Rongmei Literature Society that has they have worked for you. Some of you know that this is a familiar story. They have worked for over 30 years in standardizing the Rongmei language, in working on the orthography, and they're no linguists. They didn't go to the universities. They didn't have a master in linguistics, but then they went to professor after professor, very humbly asking them to help them. And I have I have interviews of hours and hours of interview recorded, and talking about how they struggled initially, and after many years, decades of working hard, facing hostility, people mocking at the spellings and the pronunciation, and they're trying to negotiate between the hill people and the valley people, and kind of Nungba accent and Temenglong accent and Fal accent and project area accent, and all put them together. They have worked for 30 years, and in the 1990s, early 1990s, they have entered into the mainstream of a main arena of education. And so they became the champion for textbooks. Okay, this is the strategic and this is the systematic way in which they entered Rongmei language into the mainstream. And class 10 was written, class 12 was written. Currently, they are working on the syllabus of BA. This BA syllabus is going to be very interesting because it has it's a work of like 30 years. And then they're finally coming to a point where they are going to enter into the university. And I can even say that I'm very privileged to have been asked to contribute towards this BA syllabus. And this presentation, whatever I'm saying, the literary history of the Rongmei people will be contributed to the BA syllabus. It's not going to be one essay that I'm going to write, but whatever I have found in my research, it's going to be part of it. And it's mutual, because during my field work, these are the guys who helped me in finding these books, and they gave me books after books, tell me to go there, tell me to go this, and I went all over asking for the books, and the authors themselves don't have the books. And anyway, so that's a different story for another day. But I was saying that Lanbuan and Star Kamai and all went into performative art, and then Lungkubuan and Ragongning went into literary, kind of activism, or linguistic activism. And Reverend Ngakho Longmei led the Bible and classical hymns project. Chawa Kamson went on to produce 12 books on religious writings, and you would see that the Tingka Ragong subjects, the kind of books that they have published between 1994 and 2016, there are about 26 books published, and most of these was published under the able leadership of one of the members of this Writers Forum. So Writers Forum was in fact a formative days for all these writers who would become these people that we will be studying about, will be doing PhD about. So these are very very times, the early 1990s. But the older generation like Marurung Muriamai, who wrote, who was an avid collector of folklore. He has published over 10 books on folklore, on rituals, on chants, on folk songs and folk tales. He wrote bilingually, both Manipuri and Rongmei, and then he wrote proverbs, and he kind of theorized what lachap is and all of that. And he would eventually become the authoritative figure as the main, his books would become the authoritative source for the books that I was talking about for Tingka Ragong Sapriak, like 26 books. A lot of books were based on the primary resources that he has kind of gathered. And you also find that like my father, I don't want to talk about my father so much, but then he was also part of the Writers Forum. And in that he wrote, in 2006, he wrote his magnum opus, which was a story of Gariam Nang. It's just called Gariam Nang. It's a story of folk legendary hero. And then, but then it is 800 pages in epic form, in verse form. And it has from cradle to grave. If you look at the story of Gariam Nang, you could tell that in half a page, but also it can be told in 800 pages. And how does one do that? We do that from the birth to his death, the entire ritual, the entire journey of a Rongmei person. The ritualistic traditions have been put together, and songs, there are 77 songs in that one single book. And then you see it's a repository of Rongmei cultural, repository of Rongmei cultural traditions in one single book. And so all of these, you would find that, these are the guys who were once gathered at this very humble, cranny of a place, in a tattered school, and then you see the movement had begun. And of course, it has. We have seen a big lull after a point, but I'll come to that later. And but then you also see that there is some people who were experimenting writing novels, and then here for example, Dinkham Guanmai novella. And again, like I was saying, they look at folklore as the source. For example, in 1987, Dinkham Guanmai wrote a book called Gariam Nang Katni Vilena, this fascination for Gariam Nang, and Rogongning Gangmai's long poem, you all are familiar, Mairing and Lubuanai, which was first read in 1989, which was developed into video film by the same name in 1990, and became the first film in Rongmei language, scripted and directed by the poet himself. So, and of course, the rest is history, how digital film came about this is a time for me to advertise as well, that we are, Rongmei Scholars Association is trying to publish an edited book, and we are gathering people who can write for it. And one person who has worked on cinema, film studies, she is willing to write on Rongmei films. So watch out. So, and you see that, and then prior to, I have mentioned about Rongmei, who have written a lot on rituals and chants and songs and songs of the gods and all of that. Before that, prior to TRC, there was another religious organization called the Champa Society, a religious organization, which is actually precursor to the more successful, perhaps, TRC sect. They publish a few books on rituals and belief systems, such as Pupo Lon Kasoi Kadam Katni Kaba, 1978. Tingkao Kandi Dam by 1979, and Tingkao Ragon Karek Kani Thaimei Thai Lon Kaba, 1979. So now I want to, because if I carry on talking about this, there's so many I could speak the whole day. You ask somebody who has done a work for 10 years and you ask them to speak, I'll bore you to death. Just talk endlessly. So instead of that, to just refresh you from my face, from this, kind of, okay, I'm going to screen share it. Here, oops, what is this? Can you see the screen? Oops. Can somebody tell me? Just a sec.
Yeah, you can see
this. Dani, just a sec. I'm so sorry. I'm asking my husband to help me. Can you see the catalog? No, just a sec. Okay. So in the catalog, you would see I have written in chronological order. The problem is that in my thing, it is, I can't see. If you look at okay, right. If you look at, it's a long sort of a catalog, and the whole of it, I can't, give a sort of elaborate. Instead of that, again, an advertisement. I'm hoping that I'll be able to write a paper on this, and I have a paper already, but then write a paper worth publishing. And And this catalog would be part of the edited book as well. So if you're planning to do a PhD on Rongmei literature, here is your treasure. And so you see that 1937 to I have up to 2016, but there are many books that I have not collected, so I don't have the date of publication, but I just have the name of the author and the name of the title of the songs, that the title of the songs is the title of the book. So now I'll just pick on few things that I think would be interesting, not just on folklore, but also different genres of kind of publication that we have seen over the years. One is Deep Jump. Okay, some of you might be familiar with Deep Jump. I'm not talking about the Deep Jump in Tamenglong, but I'm talking about the 1971 Deep Jump. This is the first news magazine in Rongmei language. This was first published in 1971 published by Kabui/Rongmei Literature Society in Paradise Publishing House in Pauna Bazaar. And in Phal, the editor was Maipulung Thaimei, and it costed 30 paise. And it all included like local news of first female MA among the Rongmeis, and the number of Rongmei students passed in metric exam that year, or 3 boys leaving for Patna for an Asian school soccer team, and and then advertisement of Rongmei plays to be performed in Rongmei, the Manipur Dramatic Union, or poems and essays on culture and cultural hero, etc. Of course, there are many, later on you'll find a Christian journal published by Amen publication called Chongpai. But the Jum was short-lived, and it re-emerges. Why was it short-lived? Because there were no subscriber. Nobody could pay 30 paisa at that time. Nobody think that is enough. But then in 2002, the Jum re-emerges in Tamenglong town with wider readership across Rongmei-speaking population of Assam, Nagaland, and Manipur. But unlike the previous avatar, the new version of Dicham was mostly local news, news of local concerns, and essay on human rights and environment. But then it stopped printing again in 2015, and the same editor started the Chum as the new, and it's still going on even now. Tamenglong also has Tamenglong Times and Ganfu and the rest. And so, but then the first one was Dicham in 1971. Now, quickly, so I will just quickly go to the particularly, this is important, I guess, because the 3 decades beginning from 1980 to the mid 2000s, there was substantial, number of books written and published, and most of them are myths and migration stories and not folk songs and proverbs only, but also a lot of stories that were compiled. I'll give you some examples. Anthology of folk tales published during this period, 1980s to 2000, mid 2000s. Let's say Thaidopari in 1984 by Maidon, PG Maidon, Rongmei Khau Rainung Pari by Marurung Rongmei, 1986. Haizatna Pari in 1987, and by Akamgon by Tipmak Mai Dukun by LP by CP Lumpu Buan, and Bangkun Pari 1993 by How Mai Mu Society, How Mai Mu Association rather. Introduction to Rongmei Naga 1993 by R. Makuga, Asa Khani Michirung, and Sanaring Pyu Kaipari 1999 by A. Goimai. This is Dr. Alana's father. Zeleng Rong Naga Paikam Kadang Khat 2000 by PH Gongchalong, Rapari in 2007 by Chavo Kamson, and Mahauto Bay in 2008 by Dindai Gangmai. So there is a marked difference, because I collect orally as well, not just the printed material. There is a marked difference between the orally narrated stories and the printed material, because there is a reason, because writing is a political act. We should never forget that every writing is a political act. And why are they writing folklore? Why are they writing folk tales particularly? And in that, you see that the difference that I assume, that I kind of find, is that the latter, that is the printed material assumed to contribute historical documentation. They are not just stories, but they are historical documentation from the, from the writer's point of view. This printed anthology were commonly accompanied by elaborate introduction explaining the importance of preserving the tales of community before they disappear. But however, more than the preservation project, what stands out was this nationalistic tenor, both in terms of rigor with which the stories are told, and also the selection of the story itself. So, for example, P.H. Gongsalong's Zilengrong Naga Paikam Kadang Kadang 1, the first volume, 2000, and Dindai Gang Mai Mahautobay, 2008, are anthology of folk stories, which include creation myths, migration stories, history of the villages and clans, and both of these collections assume historical documentation based on accounts passed down orally by the elders of the tribe. And these tales are not merely memories of the author's childhood. Rather, in addition to the author's memory of these tales, it is clear that the anthology are intentional collection for the purpose. There is a purpose. The purpose is to construct the history of the people. So P.H. Gongsalong's book included a list of storytellers who contributed towards the collection, along with details of the village of the storytellers and the years the stories were told. And according to this author, he collected these stories for 44 years. Many of us have not lived 44 years, but he said that he has collected these stories for 44 years till the time the book was finally published. So similarly, R. Makuga, Introduction to Rongmei Naga, traces the history of Rongmei through creation myths, ritual chants, and folk tales. And all these attempts to write Rongmei history or collection of history of the Zilengrong, Zilengrong or Rongmei. Part of these anthologies have relied heavily on attempts to write Rongmei history, has relied heavily on Zilengrong or Rongmei, relied heavily on oral narrative, from creation myths to their first contact with the Boros in the prehistoric times, the Kacharis, the Kukis, the Burmese in 18th and 19th centuries, and the Meitei, some said, from the 1st century onwards. Stories of great achievements of the mythical characters, the folk heroes, divinely blessed warriors, the singers, serves as an important landmark, for they are interlocked with the narrative of historical growth of the community. So by tracing the Rongmei back to their roots, the tales give them the sense of what do they give? They give them a sense of coherent past, a history from which to formulate an identity discourse. So it is important to recognize that Rongmei folk tales' predominant existence is in oral form, which surpasses the printed version. But the few that I have talked about and have mentioned they are written in intending to educate, to inform, and to express distinct ethnic identity by consolidating the idea of Rongmei community through this dissemination of pre-colonial, cultural forms, pre-colonial, pre-modern cultural forms. In the recent years, the oral tradition has remained a vital source for the politics of identity, and folklore continues to reappear in printed form in various versions to serve different purposes. That was what I said in the beginning, that it remained this folk tales, particularly folk stories, it remains soft in the hands of the collector, in the hands of the people who publish it, because they are used for different purposes, for specific purposes. And thus, storytelling, this is what do I want to say at the end. I'm not ending yet, sorry, but so the storytelling is situated in the context of constructing history, whereas the traditional Western scholarship differentiates history with myth. The Zilengrong or the Rongmei, the stories were narrated in Rongmei language, particularly conflate them in seamless narrative, seamless flow of narrative. Oral tales, myths, songs are being brought up in print form to reshape and serve the purpose of this small community in their endeavor to find a place of belonging, both politically and socially. The Zelengrong folktales, or the Rongmei folktales collection, made especially during the time of political turmoil, cannot be referred to without analyzing the political intent of the collectors and narrators as well. The meager volume available in Rongmei language are significant historical documents in the reconstruction of history of a people's group whose struggle remained under one ethnic group had witnessed different unfavorable historical moments. So to conclude, I'm going to conclude now because I still have a lot to say, but let me conclude here. So the conclusion that I'm trying to draw is that from the early, if we have to look at the can I stop sharing the, I forgot about it. Okay, now, so from the early missionary publication to experimenting with creative writing to a bulk of folklore collection up till the current times, where recent publication has been used to construct or more streamline history of the tribe or religious canon, the development of Rongmei literature can be traced, over a span of 8 decades. However, the emergence of the literary class out of a dominantly oral community and the evolution of oral materials into a significant literary body of work cannot be divided into clear-cut chronological period. There are beyond doubt overlaps and recurrences in any division in terms of dominant nature of work published in Rongmei language, in terms of genre or in terms of the writers. But I'm trying to kind of make it into a broad phases of as I look at the chronology as well as the distant reading, the finding of my distant reading of the catalog that I have prepared. I'm dividing into 3 distinct phases. The 3 distinct phases, when I say these 3 distinct phases, I'm going to name them formative, number 1, number 2, descriptive, and the third one as analytical phases. So when I say the formative phase, Christian literature in 1930s and 40s were mostly confined to translation of existing work written in English or other tribal languages such as Thado, and the formative phase also did not see any real creative work or collection of oral material until a few decades later. So the formative phase described this short period clubbed together from 1960s onwards. Though the readership was very limited, experimentation with different literary genres were circulated within while the formation of literary societies, forums to promote Rongmei literature began to gain popularity. Creative writers incorporating traditional tales in their works, and tales were retold in theater, novels, and short stories. And this was the first phase. The second phase, I call it descriptive phase, include publication of books related to folk life, rituals, narrative prose, songs, proverbs, etiquette, and manners to preserve as well as promote communities' tradition and customs. The community life, cultural ethos, worldview, and described in these books in books of folk art and form. So they are trying to describe themselves. Formative years, they were trying to experiment. They're trying to, their first encounter with print culture, or print for that matter. And then the second phase is while they are describing using the medium of print, they were trying to describe themselves. And now where do we stand? I think we have come to a point where we have reached in second decades of the 21st century. We are in the analytical phase. In analytical phase, one very good example of an analytical phase is the publication of the 26 books in Tingkauragong subject sect. 26 books of them rewritten, and they are trying to, if you study the book, you would see the processes in which religious scriptures are canonized. Okay, they are trying to create a canon of religious text, and that was based on the formative phase. That was the books that were published in the formative phase. And so you see that also we have this catalog, and in no way it's complete. In no way it is going to be complete very soon, but it will be added on and on and on, and it's going to be an ongoing process as long as Rongmei people keep writing in Rongmei language. So you see that how the analytical phase is when we see historical, religious, socio-political treatment of these books, and see. Few things that I have left out would be, these are PhD topic on their own rights. For example, the coming of textbooks, the whole history of Roman Literature Society, or for that matter, Christian literature. And in the let me share my screen again. Here, towards the end of this thing, I have books that are not dated, and most of them are Christian books, and has a Christian Pomling Lu, Christian Lu Ding, Zion Lu Tan, Tan Thuan Pui Lu, Church Lu, Calvary Lu, Revival Lu, Christian Lu Zam, Hindai Lu, Ragong Lu, Lu Guang. Then it goes on, and if you look at the genre, it was religious. So this is an area that I have not started working on, and don't worry, again, an advertisement for the edited book. There is one person who is ready to write on Christian songs, Luzam, and he has already presented a paper internationally, and he's ready to contribute a chapter on Luzam. So now you see that we can continue talking during the question and answer hour, but few things, maybe I will stop speaking here, but then I will, as we continue discussing, as we continue conversing, I will be able to incorporate many things that I have left out in the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Senganlu. It was a fantastic presentation. One thing I really like about the presentation is on the history. It is quite interesting to see that as tradition keepers, which right from the very beginning, we as Rongmeis wanted to preserve the oral tradition, and yet the coming or the introduction of writing also is projected towards safeguarding and preserving that tradition. I think each and every one, as we participate, perhaps we all have benefited a lot. There are still lots to discuss, and I must say that it is indeed a very good beginning. Before I open for discussion, I also would like to give some observations, not strictly in terms of literary sense, but as a student of sociology, that in culture studies, in what way and in what dimension one can look at the historical linkages and the connection of what many sociologists call the tradition making. I think Dr. Senganlu's study has contributed a lot to culture studies. I must add one aspect, that indeed it is a contribution to civilizational study. What is quite interesting is that as we introduce writing to a particular tribe, in what way and in what form uniformity started to penetrate. And at the same time, the introduction of writing has also invited many other challenges. So that analysis perhaps anyone who is really interested in looking, perhaps will be interesting to see. The 250 books which the speaker has elaborated, I think they contribute a strong foundation to our community studies. Perhaps, just as my observation says, if we looked at these 250 books, the orientation, and in which direction these books are moving ahead, then perhaps it will be also interesting to see the coming as one cultural anthropologist who clearly argued that the introduction of writing somehow erases memory of one's person. That we used to remember no longer holds true. So in what way the introduction of writing contributes to such controversy, to see the problems of interpretation, to see different meanings coming out of a context, and also to link with the hidden political aspiration and aspect. Perhaps these are wider questions. One may really come in. So nevertheless, the speaker has given us a very rich history of the community's writing, and to listen to such an elaborate presentation, we really appreciate the effort put by the speaker. So these are few aspects which I thought I would also share. Now, I would like to open for discussion. Two things, we will follow. One, there is this chat box. If anyone has any technical problem, you may write down the question, and I will take the opportunity to read out the question for all of us. And the second is by raising your hands so that we can invite, and there is this proper recording of the proceeding. Once again, on behalf of Rongmei Scholars Association, we appreciate and thank the speaker for the tremendous effort put to present in the midst. So it's open for discussion now. Someone has raised her hand. The name is written as Thoidingja. So please introduce yourself and your affiliation to any institute that you are working or studying at this moment, and you may take your time. Please be short while you're asking questions so that we have enough time for the speaker to respond. What we can do is that we will take 3 questions in each session, and then the speaker will address to those concerns, and we will take another 3, and likewise we will follow. So please, Thoidingja, can you take your time?
Hi, my name is Sumitra Thoidingjam, and I work in the Department of English at Jamia Millia Islamia. I have to jump to another meeting, so I have 2 short questions. One, when he talks about the mechanism of, how like folklore enters into the mainstream and is transferred into literature and vice versa. How much do you think this has happened in Rongmei folklore, where how much of folklore has entered into literature and how much of literature has gone into folklore? And I also would like to know if you could speak some more on folklore, as you did mention it, folklore as nationalist literature and how successful it has been vis-a-vis literary text. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, anyone who would like to take the time?
Can I also ask a question?
Yes.
Yes. I think I should just switch on my camera.
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah,
Yes,
please.
yes. Sister Thaimei, this is Rongmei. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing those treasure information. I think in the days to come, I'm going to hunt you, for all those literatures. Out of the three categories that you mentioned, I would be interested more towards the analysis. But my question is related to the Meitei literature. When you are talking about the folklores and folk tales, we also have like Kabui Salang Maiba, Kabui Kayoiba, and in the modern, and popular culture, we have Kaisam Thongi Thoibi, kind of transition from those Meitei, originated kind of thing. But still, the versions, the avatar, it's keep changing. So through your long, journey of 20 plus years doing this, oral literature, print and others, what is the extent of influence of this Meitei literature to the Kabui, Rongmei oral and print media? Thanks.
Good question. GK.
Thank you, Dr. Rongmei. Yes, we will take one more question. Anyone?
I think there's some question in the chat box. I'll find it, but I think we'll take these two so that we don't waste any more time. Thank you, Billy. I call her Billy Sujata. Thank you for, I think you're joining from America. Is that right? So the two questions that Billy had asked, and I'm sorry, I call her pet name Sujata. Okay, so the question about literature, how much of literature, that is precisely what I was trying to say, that even when the writers were trying to experiment with modern forms, novels, short stories, or their main resource remain the popular tales, the folklore and things like that. But at the same time, what I just resonate with what Dr. Apun has said about does it erase memory? Does print erase memory? That's a very important debate around print and the orality and literacy, or orality and textuality. The oral text interface has a very big room for huge discourse in itself, and it's an area of study itself, and how in terms of largely dominantly oral community like the Rongmeis, you would see that the oral still surpasses, surpasses in huge number in its style of existence. Like there are still a lot more in oral than in print form. Like 250 is nothing in terms of the number of population that can tell the story, and each teller of the tale has a different version. So, but at the same time, print does influence, or in fact, this is what Stuart Blackburn talks about, and also very early work like Walter's own would talk about how literature does not stop the oral tradition. In fact, it opens the scope of oral tradition. Because if you tell me how I remember the story of Gairiam Nang, is not the story that I heard when I was little, but my memory of the story of the same story has been influenced by the play that I saw, and the dialogue that I have heard in that play. So there is nothing as there is clear line that there is folklore and there is text, and there is clear cut. They are not compartmentalized. They are not in boxes, but rather it's fluid. They flow in and they flow out, and it's seamless, and it's totally porous, and and they continue to be in most cultures. And that is the first question. Of course, the folklore has always been the second question that you talk about, the nationalist aspect aspect of collection of folklore or folktale particularly is this is not particularly unique of the Rongmei people or some tribal community, but rather this folklore, collection of folklore has always been the beginning of the nationalist consciousness. Because if you look at going back to the 19th century, the Romantic age, you would find the word folk is the German word for it is Volk, as in Volkswagen. Volk means like people. So the whole idea of collection, be it in Norway, be it in Germany, or later on in England, and you would find that all of this collection began to find the folk, the people. Okay, so where are my people? How do I find my people in this, the imperialist, cultural imperialism of the Greece and the Latin? How do I find my real people? Who are the real Germans? Who are the real English? Then what do they do that? How do they do that in 19th century or earlier in the 18th century? Is that they try to look for that old tale, and then they try to find the folk, the people, my people. Okay, who are my people? And through the tracing of this story, so the whole of this, the idea of collection, the idea of storytelling is always not apolitical. It is political act of finding your people, articulating, spreading, informing, propagating one's idea of my people. So in fact, so it is rooted in nationalism. It's rooted in finding your ethnicity or your people, your folk, whatever you name it. So that is the question that is, I hope, answer in a little way to Sujata's question. Again, the question posed by Rongmei. It's a very important question. In fact, you are in Ambedkar University. I presented a paper in Ambedkar University on the Tiger Man, on Kabui Kayolba, and the Meitei version, as well as the Rongmei version of Kamang Zeliangpu, and how in both the story, the variation is very interesting, because it involves the other, okay, a dangerous other who is attacking your vulnerable kin. In the Rongmei story, it's the youngest brother. In Meitei's version, it is the Tabaton, the youngest sister of the seven brothers, and seven brothers in Meitei tale represents the Meitei, 7 clans of Meitei. And then the whole story of the 7 clans of Meitei, it's 7 brothers of the Meitei. They try to protect from a Kabui tiger man, Kabui Kayoiva. And then in the Rongmei tale, they also have their version of tiger man, but they are not, I don't know whether they are Meitei or not, but then the tiger man is a representation of the dangerous other. Okay, particularly in Meitei tale, you would find that it is supposed to be, it is to protect inter-ethnic marriage. Okay, they shouldn't enter into inter-ethnic marital ties, and so they have to say that these people, the Kabui people, perhaps one of the earliest community who have started to interact with the Meitei people, they are beastly, they are like monsters, and they are not supposed to, they're bloodthirsty, all of that. So we also have in our so I later on found that in most communities in Manipur, be it Lamkang, be it Thadau, be it Paite, they have all the version of the tiger man. Tiger Man story, the only thing is the villain, the tiger man is not them, it's the other. So you see that this circulation of very, very common tale like the tiger man is continuing. And it's very interesting, because for me, the interaction with the Meitei, first of all, there is this, like I was saying, the main reason, Professor Bijoy of Northeast Center in JNU, he talks about this tiger man, and he says that, actually this is to what of Kabui people from marrying the girl and blah blah blah. But now actually we were brothers. But then Hinduism, blame it on Hinduism and the caste system that they brought in and blah blah blah. But then it is interesting that the evolution of the idea of Manipuri. Okay, the Manipuri idea, the idea of Manipuri, the pan Manipuri Manipuri identity. You see that earlier was Manipuri is synonymous to the Meitei people alone, but then now after the 2001 uprising, you would find that there is this huge campaign, political campaign for a consolidated idea of Manipuri, the pan Manipuri identity. In that you would see a lot of valley dwelling Rongmei identify themselves as Manipuri rather than, they don't want to go to Nagaland, blah, blah, blah. There is a whole politics going on there. And then in that, movies like Kaisam Thong Thoibi or Yaiskul Pakhang Angauba and all, they have started coming in that, contrary to the Kabui Kayoiba, there is this encouragement of inter-ethnic marriages or romance, at least, even if in the end there is no marriage happening between the hero and the heroine. There is this idolization of this good Kabui woman or Rongmei woman who could adjust to the Meitei community or desirable rather than the Kabui Kaba, the beastly man that is. And it's interesting that how the women's body, women's sexual being has been used as the battleground of either reconciliation or, for that matter, even for the conflict as well as for reconciliation. So it is very interesting that a lot of people can, young scholars can think about writing on this and the evolution of the Pan-Manipuri identity, and also is found in folklore and things like that. So that is a long answer to your short question, Gamumai.
Okay, thank you. I'm just checking the messages if there is any question from the participants. Yes, Brother Timothy has asked, is there any comparative studies made on volume of works in Rongmei vis-a-vis other tribal communities? That 250 books that you have listed, is there any comparative studies made by
I think, sorry for cutting in, sorry.
No problem, no problem.
Anyway, yes. Comparison, I think, like I was saying, it is not, there are no theoretical papers, the theoretical books in this collection. As I was saying, it's mostly collection of tales or creative writing or translation of Christian literature. And there is nothing as there are non-fiction, but the non-fiction would be about, the tradition or our cultural way of of wedding or something like that. These are non-fiction, or something like a treatise on folk song. It's called Zileng Rongmei Lu Lam Khao. It's undated, and it's about the song, the classification of Rongmei folk songs and things like that. So the non-fiction available are not does not have any theoretical work, but rather, as I was saying, we scholars in our or whatever, we are in the analytical phase. That is what our role should be now, that we work towards circulation of the tales or variation of the tales, or for that matter, the influences, as Gamumai's question is, what are the influences that we see? What are the theoretical kind of a framework that we could create in comparison to other variations found in other communities in Manipur or elsewhere?
Can I come in?
Yeah, please. Who is that?
Samson.
Francis?
Samson.
Samson. Hi, Samson. Good to hear you.
Nice to see you too.
Yes, please introduce yourself and also your affiliation, in a sense, which university or, where are you located at the moment?
Yeah, I'm Kamesh Samson, and I'm a junior fellow at the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library here in Delhi. Listening to the lecture of Dr. Senganlu, I find that the narratives which you have gathered, or the oral traditions which you have accumulated, may be perhaps used even in social science discipline or social science disciplines as a theoretical tool in order to build very strong theories on our people. And having said that, I also would like to bring one problem in the history of our people. I, in fact, have due respect for Professor Rongmei Thaimei, but I also have a very serious problem with his academic writing, which I would call submissive referential inference, meaning his kind of history always begins with a tone of an undertone of submission to the already prevalent dominant narrative of the dominant group of the state. Unlike the book which you have mentioned, Rongmei, which I was privileged. In fact, I will use the word privileged because it's very rare for us to get hold onto such books. So I got onto that book in 2012, this Mahou Tawai by Rongmei. There is a very sharp contrast between these two writings. While Rongmei starts the history of the Rongmei people in a very independent historical journey, unlike Professor Rongmei Thaimei. So in this context, I would like to bring in the idea of emancipation in writing the history. So my question is, would you also be able to project the oral traditions of our people as a theoretical tool in order to write an emancipatory history?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think I would say that I respect your perspective, and I think Samson is a very shy guy, and many of you may not know him, but he has done his. He's a fellow. He was a fellow. He just finished his fellowship in Advanced Study, Institute of Advanced Study in Shimla, and now he is working in Teen Murti. He has a sizable publication to his credit, and I respect his writing. And I know that his PhD was on the Lengrong movement and things like that. He's one person that everybody should talk to, and he doesn't talk. The problem is he's going to write, and let's all read him. But yeah, absolutely. I think the writing, you can take any perspective, but I think history writing, it's a narrative, and there are narratives. There is no the history, but there is no the history of the Rongmei or the history of the Zelengrong people. It is a history of the Zelengrong people, a history of Rongmei people, and we can have different perspectives to it. And each narrative has to be backed up with evidence, and that's about it. And we can have conflicting histories to conflicting narratives and conflicting histories to it, and I respect that, and I agree. If you ask my personal opinion, and if you ask my personal take on the project of writing history or rewriting, whatever you call it, I don't like this thing that that is flooding the academia, re-emancipate, reimagining, something. So it doesn't have to it could be fresh. And also I agree. I would all for it, and I would go for this emancipatory aspect of this oral tradition, or using the oral tradition as a way, a route to emancipating our people or our history. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Mataina Wicham Dinbo. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hi,
yeah, I'm Wicham. I am now, speaking from Gangtok. I'm basically from Sikkim University. What is this? Okay. Yeah, I'm really excited to be in the inaugural talk of the Rongmei Scholars Association. And the topic is such a perfect thing to start with this kind of activity. And I have lots of things to discuss and to talk or to ask, but I think I'll continue that in other platforms. But quickly, two practical things I want to incur. When you talk of the literature, I think the writing system, the orthography will have to come in only, especially like for our community, or especially for the communities in Northeast. So in your experience, what are the practical issues that when anybody tries to write in Rongmei, they face while writing? Maybe what do you see any difference, like in the formative stage, the way you have put the 3 stages so far in the in Rongmei literature, the formative. I like that division very much, and the descriptive and the analysis part. So do you see any difference, any problem, practical problem faced by people to write, I mean, the means of writing, the script, the orthography. And secondly, you have mentioned about Ragwaning, who has a huge number of folk tales collection.
Folk songs.
I think,
Folk songs.
yeah, folk songs. You said about 500. I want to know if you have met him. How did he get that much songs? Did he go from village to village or region to region? Because there are so many variations. And I mean, how did he learn? Where did he get? And where can we access those songs? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, first question, does one face problem in writing Rongmei? I think everybody does. And I remember once Rongmei and I were discussing, and in all these 100 WhatsApp group we were added, Rongmei would try to read one text in Rongmei, and while he is trying to read the first sentence, there are 50 more messages that he cannot catch up with. So it was a joke, but it's a real challenge. And I'm a student of literature, and I not only study, but I also teach the evolution of English language. So to give the safe analogy, the parallel of any language getting standardized or getting kind of a common ground for, every 2 kilometers in England, the accents are different. Every 5 person, after you go to a train station, everybody speaks in different accents and different vocabulary. No one can understand. If the Rongmeis, among the Rongmeis is the same. Tamenglong people make fun of the Imphal Valley accent. Imphal Valley people make fun of the Tamenglong accent. We cannot understand each other half the time. That's why this Rongmei, it's one Rongmei people, but I'm still speaking in English because this is the language perhaps I can make everybody understand. So you see, but then jokes apart, what is interesting is that there has to be a process of standardizing, and in that there will be a lot of I have mentioned this in my presentation as well. There will be a lot of contradictions as well as hostility, and one claiming over another which one is the correct one. And this process is expected. It is not uncommon all across the world. And the English that we're speaking is not the English of majority of England. It is the Londoners' English, and amongst the London who were writing the dictionaries in the 18th century England. And these were the people who were, Johnson, for that matter, Samuel Johnson, who wrote the first dictionary in English language. He was somebody who kind of made sure that English is spoken well. This is to counter the huge influence of Latinate. At that point in time, in the medieval times, the medium of instruction in England was Latin, not English. So how do they counter this cultural linguistic invasion, or whatever you call it, imperialism we call it? So they have to make their own dictionary. Do you think Johnson had no problem in that? Of course, he was attacked from all sides, but then he did it, and then it took a long time. It was only in the later part of 18th century, late 18th century, when people like Milton have started writing, and followed by people, Alexander Pope, who started writing in such impeccable English that English has finally had the confidence to say that we have a literature of our own. And began with Chaucer. If you 14th century, if 15th century, if you read Chaucer now, you wouldn't understand that English at all. So you see that when I look at the catalog, you would see that a lot of books that are written, I have collected, I read it, I don't understand. Many of you will not understand, but I understand some of them that were written in Imphal Rongmei and Bengali script at that. It's a challenge of I don't know, epic level. So epic proportion. So you see that, you would see that, of course, I know Vicham, you are involved in this Liangmai standardizing writing grammar, Kailad and you. I really appreciate your effort. It's going to be a rough road. And I know between you and Kailad also, one is from Thalon, the other one from Thaimei side, and there is a major clash. I don't understand your Liangmai. I always joke with Vicham that I don't understand. My husband is Liangmai, by the way, so I kind of understand my husband's village accent, but I cannot understand Vicham's accent, because he says, according to him, is the pure form. So anyway, whatever it is, well, this is going to be a major struggle. And as I was saying, the Rongmei Literature Society, they have worked for over maybe 25-30 years, and still they are struggling to make it acceptable for everyone. And I don't think that we are going to see that happening very soon. Acceptance of a particular writing. That's why, the Rongmei Literature Society, the road that I've taken is interesting, because it has to come through textbooks. Standardization has to come through textbooks. How do we learn English? This English that I'm speaking, it came through text learning. So it has to come through textbooks. And once you enter into the education, and for that matter, even any language, Hindi, Hindustani, you name it, Urdu, the Hindi that we know now, the Shuddh Hindi that we know now was not like that. Every 5 kilometers, Hindi has a different version. So language variation, of course, is universal, and it's not particularly. So let me take a opportunity in appealing my Rongmei brothers and sisters that let's respect each other. Let's not make fun of each other. Let's can have fun. There is nothing wrong in having fun, but let's not look down, or let's not kind of mock or think one is superior to the other. And as a student as a teacher of language, and who have studied the history of evolution of language, I find it very offensive that one is considered more superior and the other, or authentic than the other. Everyone has influences, and the influence could be more, the influence could be less. But anyway, Vicham, I thank you for coming. You promised that you will come, and I'm so glad to see you.
Yeah, the second question you forgot.
Second question, what is that?
The methodology he collected.
Methodology, the folk songs. I had a very long interview with him. He has, you see, the genre is very different. What he, it's not easy. It's not very difficult to get 500 songs, especially amongst the Rongmeis. And what Uncle Ragoning has done is he started with songs of the legends, as in Jijau Pulu. Jijau Pulu is the songs are sung perhaps by a man, a legendary minstrel called Jijau Pulu. Then there is Jalo Nanglu, there is this Gariam Nanglu, and all these songs. And then he goes on to publishing more songs where he kind of looked at a genre wise, as in lullabies and agricultural related. Within the agriculture related songs, labor related songs, there is this rice pounding song, there is seed sowing song, there is weeding song, there is this harvest song, there is songs of all kinds. So genre-wise, there is when you go by classification, then there is this ritualistic songs, then there is festival-related song. Within the festival-related songs, there is dance song. What kind of dance is it? Is it a promotional dance? As in honoring the person who has achieved something, or who has been promoted to higher rank in Kangchu, or is it just a song of merrymaking, or is it the different kind of dances? Within the different kind of dances, you would find that there is this formal, ritualistic dance during, sung during Bandru rituals, or song of, dances of the little girls, they call it. And so you see that I find it, what is also interesting is that among the folklore books that I have collected, the majority is folk songs. And in every village, there is this lupao, Okay, that is the master of the song, the choir master or whatever, the person who teaches the younger generation these folk songs. And every village has one, more or less. Perhaps in the older times, even now there are many in Tingkham and all. There is Tingkham village. There is one Lupo. I speak to him often, and he has a huge collection himself. And I have videotaped them, and I have discuss with them and things like that. Even my father has a huge collection. So the 500 songs is not very difficult to, especially among the Rongmeis who are still practicing these songs in huge numbers. Of course, Pulau Ragoning would have collected from Nungba area because he belongs to Bulongdai village in Nungba subdivision of None district now. So yes, he said that he kind of used to hang out, if you have to answer about your question, he said he used to hang out with oldies from the time when he was little, and then he was really interested in knowing about the songs and writing down the songs and things like that. And then he says that he's not a lupo himself, but then he has keen interest, but then his interest has shifted from folk songs to championing the Rongmei orthography.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll have to do the unpleasant task now. We have this chat messages. I think we'll take up those questions, and I think with that we will proceed to the formal program that we have. The vote of thanks and the rest. Because right now the time is 7:32. So Mr. Speaker, so if you can look at the messages, there are 2-3 very interesting questions. If you could address them. One to begin with is Samson Thaimei. How do one distinctively view a narrative as the Rongmei narrative in the context of the unity and collectivity of Zhelengrong? And 2 other questions which followed, if you could speak.
Okay, Samson, this is the burning question, and I think it's very important to ask. Why does Zhelengrong movement fail? I think the culprit lies in the narrative, the dominant. I'm not saying that they're entirely to be blamed, but dominantly the Rongmei narrative has a big role in the failure of the Zhelengrong movement, I guess. And many people may like, don't throw stone at me now. The Taliban are still not here, so anyway. But it is true also that a lot of books that I find. With a title Zhelengrong were written by Rongmeis, and a lot of cultural, when we say, for example, when we say Zhelengrong culture or Zhelengrong festival or Zhelengrong this, Zhelengrong that, of course, it's dominantly the Rongmei narrative. And in the context of the unity and collectivity of Zhelengrong, I think it's a larger question, and I cannot answer in this short time. And also I think we should continue. This is the bone of contention, all this WhatsApp fights and the angry trolling of each other happens because of a lot of time because of this. I can answer it in a more elaborate way, and more than anyone else, Samson, you are the one who can answer more than me. You have done your work on Zhelengrong movement, and you're continuing to continuing with your inquiry into this politics, and you should be able to give us, and I'm requesting you to write on this for our edited book. So I have briefly answered it. Thank you, Azang. Can you brief us about the orthography followed by syllabus in BA or class 11 and 12? This it's going to be a long answer. BA is not yet introduced. It is on the process of making the BA syllabus, and they're still struggling to find the thing is, as I said, the books are there already, as you have seen in the catalog. The thing is that because they follow a certain orthography, all those old writing has to be converted to the new system of writing. For example, it's a novel and it's like 200 pages or 300 pages novel, and then you're going to write everything out again, rewrite. So it's a very tedious, extremely boring work, and it's not even like translation. It's almost like transliteration from one script from one style of writing to another. So that is what they are working on right now. And in the class 11 and 12, there are many people who have written the exam. And I'm not part of Rongmei Literature Society. I have some figures. I do have figures, but I can't find it in my laptop now. But I can give. I think the best thing to do is you go and interview the Literature Society people. They'll give you, instead of me, kind of groping about for figures, you just ask them and they will be able to give you, if figures is what you're asking for. And as far as the BSc linguistics is concerned, I think they're still working on it. And I'm Joel. Hi, Joel, and live in Guwahati. My question is, did you encounter an agenda of morality setting in early Roman? Morality setting, I don't understand what you're saying, but I could answer in the being codified in written form. I think, of all the genres of folklore, my personal interest is proverbs. And because the whole idea of proverb is that there is an ancient wisdom, there is an ancient kind of a standard of morality, standard of expectation from a Rongmei boy and girl, and that has to be taught through like what we call wisdom literature. And the proverbs are like so deeply integrated in everyday language. When I go for field work and I ask people to give me Rongmei proverbs, they said, I don't know anything. I may know one or two, but I don't know. But then you converse with them for a long time, for days together. You will, time to time, they'll come up with proverbs. The proverbs are collected like that. You have to converse. You have to constantly talk with a person who probably knows a lot of proverbs. And it is highly integrated. In that you would see the morality, the whole, in the idea of goodness, bad, the idea of appropriate behavior, inappropriate behavior, what is expected of a learner, that is the younger lot, what is expected of the older. They are supposed to act like an elder, and if they don't act like an elder, and then they are unbecoming of an elder, that they are not respected, and all of that. This kind of morality, of course, is found in abundance in proverbs. As for example, you can if you're interested in gender studies, you can also look at the proverbs and you can see how women are expected to behave, and women are expected in their role through these proverbs. So the more you call it moral setting, or you call it cultural philosophies, or cultural expression of their worldview, you find a lot of them in proverbs. And moreover, you also have, of course, in folk tales, cautionary tales, how bad things happen if you marry the same clan. For example, there is a story of one Thaimei girl falling in love with another Thaimei boy, and they get married, and they went through like hell, literally. They die a brutal death. So you see that how this kind of cautionary tales are there, and I think you're asking for that. Of course they are there. Cautionary tales are a lot, but I'm saying more nuanced kind of moral standards are found in the proverbs.
Okay, thank you so much. I know, and I'm sure there will be many more questions, but due to the lack of time, it's already 7:39, so the discussion will carry forward. So as per the procedure, if Juliana Thaimei, she is the rapporteur. Am I audible?
Apun,
Yeah.
I think you just write and send it to us. She will not do the...
What to actually see the procedure, the proceeding of the program, that if she wants to comment, for 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, then I think time can be given to our rapporteur of the day. Rapporteur is Juliana Thaimei. She is PhD candidate, Center for the Study of Social Exclusion and Inclusive Policy at Manipur University. So before we give time for vote of thanks, if Juliana wants to come in and try to give a small summary of the proceeding, please, Juliana, take your time.
Hello, everyone. I was actually not prepared for this, but I will just give a very short summary of the proceeding today. And more than expected, we've had, we were talking in the beginning that we expected only say 20, 30 people, but during the main during the main talk, there were at least 100 people, and I think that is a very good start for all of us. And we, as the speaker, as the chairperson has rightly pointed out, this is a very historic event for all of us, not just the Rongmei Scholars Association, but for the whole community itself. And also, we have had a very hardworking, as it shows in her through her research that she presented to us. She has, our speaker today, Dr. Senganlu, had been very hardworking all these years that she had documented all these. And I think for many of us, especially the younger ones, we have not had access to even this information that there are 250 and more books or works on written in our Rongmei. And so with a very, very elaborate and a very short seeming, it was long, but it seemed like a very short talk. It was a very informative, very analytical, very political, and also it was a very intriguing, and it kind of instilled in us a very kind of a fire for us to, to keep working, to keep this fire burning. And also, like one of the participants who asked the question, the three phases of our Rongmei, the development of our Rongmei print culture. That was a very good, very inclusive categorization. And also there are so many others, but then we've had very important questions from not only Rongmei people, but also from our guests here. And I am not able to summarize all of these because I was just hearing the talk. So I will try my best to write more detailed and more hearable, readable document. Thank you.
Thank you, Ju. Thank you so much. She was not prepared for this because I told her that she doesn't need to worry about it. It was my bad.
Okay, thank you, Juliana. So the formal event.
Apun, you're muted.
Yes, sorry. Yes, to propose a vote of thanks, may I now invite Dr. Lungthuyang Rongmei. He teaches at Gargi College, Delhi University.
Yeah,
yes.
Check. Am I audible to all of you? Okay. Yes, it is a very happy and historic moment for all of us this evening, today, because it is the day that we are able to really begin with the RSA academic discussions and activity. And thank you so much, Dr. Apun, Chairperson and Senior Assistant Professor at the DSA, and the President of the RSA, for presiding us this talk. And also I want to thank Dr. Thaimei, yes, Associate Professor, for enlightening us all about the Rongmei literature. We have such a rich traditions, cultures, folklores. In fact, your speech was wonderful. I hope the young scholars will get learn a lot of it. And also, though I'm not from the particular background of literature, I get to know that we have such a rich literature and there's folklores as well. It is very good collections of our literary works. It's kind of huge compiled catalog that you have. And it is tremendous pleasure to have all the members of the RSA this evening, and also our well-wishers for attending this inaugural talk. Thank you so much again for the RCFE, Rongmei Christian Fellowship Delhi, for allowing us to allow this Zoom facilities. Otherwise, RSA is just beginning. We don't have any facilities as of now. We are using the platform. Thank you so much, the pastor and the executive. And also our reporter, young reporter Juliana here, Thaimei, she is doing well. She did very well. Reporter work is not that easy at all, because we know, and I know because I have worked with the NSA as well. So for those who missed today's talk, we will try to upload on YouTube. And the next upcoming series of talk, we'll try to have more Zoom capacity, and we'll try to for telecast live YouTube as well. So therefore, thank you everyone. And we look forward for the upcoming series of RSA talk. And thank you once again to all of you. Rongmei, Ring Sangdiu, Puknalim.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lung Tuyang. Indeed, it is a great historic day for all of us. As the chairperson of today's event, I now formally declare close to the event, which we all progressed together in a very productive manner. Thank you, dear speaker, and also thank you all the participants. The next series of our RSA talk will be in the month of September. Dr. Richard Thaimei, who is appointed at the Bhutan Royal College. He will be presenting in the next month. The details will be shared to all of you very soon. For those who could not join today's event, because we should have only 100 members, we express our sympathy and best wishes to come a little early so that you could be the luckier one next time. So with this, I formally close the event. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, and Rongmei Ungsangdir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank
may I
you.
request,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
stay
Thank you,
back.
Dr.
See
Thaimei.
you in the next
Wonderful,
talk.
wonderful speaking.
May I request the speaker and the executive members of RSA to stay back for a few minutes.
Lung Tuyang,
Yes, yes.
please stay.
Yeah, I stay. I will open still the Zoom.
Lung Thu Yang tai advisor di đây, Rongmei scholar.
Nice. Be advisor cho.
Bamo.
Bam bende I bam tim kita Zoom nutum dikhe.
Yes, you can leave.